And they're not even in real time together. They're like in this whole narrative about what's going on, a bunch of projection and just past experiences loaded up. And they're not in real time with the person. And so getting curious and seeing that there may be more to uncover about what's happening, and to really move from like the data of and the buildup of all the storyline and having the courage to ask questions that unveil the heart. What would you love here? What do you feel? What's happening for you in this experience? And to ask more questions that way.
Okay, welcome back to the next episode of the Ignite the King podcast with my co-star, co-host, beautiful wife, Dr. Nanilea Diamond. Welcome. How are you today?
Doing well. Partner in crime.
Partner in crime. I want to jump right into
ride or die.
Ride or die. Well, that's kind of the theme of the episode, right? Because there's a lot of men that are dying out there. They're not riding. And something that came up that we were talking about feels very relevant. I've had a few conversations around this recently. I know you've had women really kind of stressing about this when the man does not do his work and the impact of that, or the unwillingness to show up, to do the work. It's one thing to say, I don't know what to do or how to do it, but it's another thing to be kind of ignorant or naive that there is work to do. Right. And I know you've heard this many times from women. It's like, how do I get my man to show up, to drop in deeper with me, to do the work? And, when they don't heed the call after a long time, divorce, all kinds of things happen. So I thought this was really important to touch on this episode.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm seeing a lot of that happening more and more. It seems that there's definitely, I'm glad that we're doing this topic today, because if we can give somebody a heads up beforehand and give them a chance and an opportunity to step into leadership and action while the relationship is still intact and while they still have a chance to be there in it. Because it's something that is real, and I think it does need to be talked about. So I'm glad we're here today.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things we talk about in Ignite, one of our kind of monikers is, do you want to get hit by a feather, a brick, or a truck, right? Feather, gentle, bricks hurt, and trucks will kill you, right? So often women, and I know I'll just speak in our relationship for many, many years. It was like, hey, you gotta show up, you gotta do the work, you gotta, engage with this. And there's such a resistance. I know I had a resistance, even being in healing work, in transformational work. It was definitely still at whatever level, there was still a resistance to, I used to, what was my line? Like, it's not the time, right? It's not the time, and walk away. I remember, or we just had a call with a guest on our Ignite weekly call. And there was a man that was saying, like, I got so frustrated and so angry with my wife, and I just got up and left. And our guest was like, well, where'd you go? Like, where are you going? Like, that's the place to lean in. That's the place to do the work. And some men just honestly flat out refuse, and whatever the reason is, time or money. And frankly, divorce takes a lot of time and a lot of money. So yeah, I hope from this episode, the men out there that maybe have been on the fence, maybe just like naive or just not getting it, start to wake up and start to realize, like, in any relationship, even the best relationships, you got to work on the relationship. You got to work in the relationship. So
yeah,
share a little bit of some of what the women, and this goes both ways too. We're not just putting the men, indicting the men on this. I know I have men in my group whose wives also in the same fashion don't think that there's work to do, or don't think, whatever. So I don't want to make it an indictment of men. It goes both ways. Obviously, this is the Ignite the King podcast. So we're going to focus a little bit more on that and give some insight. So can you maybe share a little bit about the things you do hear from the women that you've coached and mentored in your group that share about this, to give men a little inside scoop to it?
Yeah. Well, just to speak to what you're sharing there too, the women are, I think we're in a new era of how we live in the world. And, women are in a place where they really want to, I mean, the tagline I have in my business is living your full glory. Like they really want to live their potential. They really want to go all in and experience life fully. And, they don't, especially when you're talking about being in your kingship and being a king. If you are attracting a queen or a woman who's in her queenship, she is not wanting to settle or hide or, live a mediocre life. Like she wants real love. She wants real passion. She wants to, play. She wants, and she knows that it's possible. I think that we're in a time now too, where we just know it's possible. And so when there's a unwillingness, and this is what I really wanted to speak to, is that, I think it's about how we learn and grow and what makes us learn and grow and our willingness to step into that growth versus having life kind of put your back against the wall. It's a self-mastery is what I found of, will you self-initiate yourself? And will you say, hey, I'm going to step up to the plate here by my own inner leadership, by my own doing what just using like health as an analogy. Sometimes you don't take care of your health until you lose it. And then you go, oh my God, that was so precious. Why didn't I take care of myself? And sometimes it takes the loss to realize what you had. And so that's really the purpose of this message today is like to get the heads up that like nothing's guaranteed. And I think there can be a sense of getting comfortable or a sense of entitlement or arrogance or immaturity that says, I don't have to do the work and I'm just owed this and I don't have to. And
I often hear I don't have work to do.
Yeah.
Like,
just non-awareness,
total
non-awareness. And really, what it comes down to is like, what is the agreement of your relationship, of your partnership? Like if you're in shadow agreement together, your agreement is we hide together. We're going to make excuses and we're both going to believe each other's excuses. And we're going to, we're both going to live in this world together where we actually reinforce each other's smallness and each other's, patterns of limitation. And that can be a reality that you're in too.
Like letting each other get away with things.
Yeah.
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 Or
like, don't look at my stuff and I won't look at your stuff.
Yeah, that kind of a thing. Or, we're going to stay safe and small. And, that's kind of how we be. And that's fine. That's, some people are choosing that. They're like, you know what? I'm good. Like, I don't need to touch the stars. Like, I'm good. And for the men that have that woman who's like, hey, I came here to really live and fully live. And, oftentimes men are attracted to that.
Right.
That feminine essence and that wild woman and that, the energy of it, the magnetism of it. And, what I really feel and see in this, and what a lot of women bring again and again, is that it comes down to like, they really want to experience extraordinary love and they want to experience life. And they came into that relationship for that. And what I hear is that a man will just say no. And it's like a stubborn energy where he just says no. And for a woman, then it becomes, a question of whether or not she's going to get her needs and her experiences outside of the relationship, like whether she's going to do that over here, which over time, breeds separation.
Absolutely.
Or whether she's going to settle and just never have that in her life.
Yeah.
And that's where it starts to become a decision that she's faced with, or that he's faced with, if it's the turn, tables are turned, where it becomes a decision of your own personal standards and, what you're going to settle for in this lifetime and what you're not.
Yeah. Well, a couple of things in there. So, Igknight and the men that really tune into this podcast are men that, for the most part, engage doing the work and want to go to another level, right? I know specifically we're talking about men that maybe just don't even get it. And that's why we're focusing on this in this particular episode. Let me give you an example. Something I heard recently from a man I had a conversation with, where it's like, and I've heard this a number of times, where men feel like they're giving a lot, where, you know, maybe they're the breadwinner and they're showing up and they're taking care of the family and they're doing all the things. And it's like, can feel like just one more thing that they just cannot handle. Ironically, it's the most important thing, right? To pour into the relationship and pour into the growth together. But men can often feel just really overwhelmed, where they feel like they're doing it all. They're, you know, providing, they're showing up, they're being a dad, right? All the things. And then it's like, now she wants to talk, or now she wants to get into the stuff. And then they, like, you know, have this like resentment, frankly, that tends to build up. And like you said before, almost like a flat out refusal to address it, right? And I know there's other men that aren't showing up in those ways and still not willing to show up. So I do want to parse that out a little bit. But what would you say to a man that maybe feels like he's already kind of stretched, he's overwhelmed, he's showing up, he thinks he's doing all the right things, and maybe it's not how she wants to be loved, right? He's, for example, with the love languages, right? Like, he's doing all these acts of service, but really she wants quality time, or, you know, just there's like a mismatch of desire and matching those desires. But what would you say to the man that feels like it just feels like one more thing that's just going to take him over the edge, and he just kind of puts his, you know, stopper up?
I'd say it's his perfect medicine to get his wholeness in his life. I mean, if he's already exhausted and overwhelmed, there's something going on, you know?
Right.
I really feel that there's just a need to recognize that relationship and intimacy. It's like, if a man's mind were like, we talk about men, think of things like they can put things in compartmentalized, like a waffle, you know, and a woman's
Waffle
like
and spaghetti,
where everything's interconnected,
Yep.
you know? But like,
Yep.
if a man using that, like if a man had his waffles, like providing or being with the kid, that's its own little waffle square. But like, for relationship, there's different waffle squares, you know, like there's different, like, and how much is he showing up there? And I think that underneath that is the idea that he's doing it for her. And I think that would be a place to really get underneath, is like, you're not there to do something for her. Like, where is it in your own value system to care about intimacy and to care about connection and to care about, you know, thriving sex life? And, you know, I think that a man that is probably really out of just overworking and overdoing these other areas, and has lost sight of his own pleasure and his own intimacy and his own heart in that. Because what I find is that it's like, if when he does make that flip, and maybe it's the energy she's coming towards him with, you know, that has a lot to do with it sometimes.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And what he thinks he's going to actually be doing, you know, in those moments. And that's why we like design out relationships and help couples to, you know, really kind of reprogram what the map of a relationship is, what exists there, what lives in your relationship. But it's, I mean, if he thinks he's doing it for her rather than for himself, I would say that's a key thing to address right away, because that's already taking him out into a pleaser.
I was about to say, I'm hearing hints of the pleaser show up right here, where it's like, what do I do to make her happy? Make her happy. And it's like, that's a never ending cup you're going to have to pour into. That's never really going to be full.
Yeah. And why is that the conversation, you know?
So just to get real practical for a moment, just to like really spotlight this, I can share from my own experience. But like, I know there's a lot of men that like don't even know how to engage that kind of conversation, that fear that conversation, that don't know how to approach it, that think that it's just going to make things worse or inflame things, and how to come into those because, you know, when it gets down to it, you have to talk and you have to open those things up and not run away and hide. Like, you have to engage and you know, get into it, right? But men can tend to also swing that pendulum, and that also doesn't work. So maybe some insight there that would help men to address that.
Which conversation? Could you tell me, like, what are they not wanting to get into?
Yeah. So like, maybe a man feels like, okay, I know everything, like everything we've been saying. Yep, that's me. Like I know I've been hiding. I know I haven't been showing up in the way that really needs to be shown up here. Maybe also some resentment might be built up where, I have some energy toward my partner, and maybe, like we would say, like there's a charge and don't clear the charge with the person you have the charge with to be able to come to those conversations clear. And maybe men haven't done that work. They're not in Ignite. They're not in a men's group. They don't know how to like process all of that ahead of time. So they might fear that they're going to bring all this energy and anger and blow up in those conversations, or they might be in for like a 3-hour talk and they don't know how to handle that, or like even just how to broach this. Right. And again, this goes both ways, but just curious, like what can a man do to really have the courage to lean in a way that would be productive?
Well, I mean, recognizing that if there's charges, there's things for him that's his own work, and that's the beauty about having Ignite or having someplace that you can go that's where you just do your own work so that you can show up, with a sense of being available. The other thing is just to get curious. I think I've seen a lot of couples where they'll have this idea about each other and the story running about the other person and this concept of who they are and the story. And they're not even in real time together. They're like in this whole narrative about what's going on, a bunch of projection and just past experiences loaded up. And they're not in real time with the person. And so getting curious and seeing that there may be more to uncover about what's happening, and to really move from like the data and the buildup of all the storyline, and having the courage to ask questions that unveil the heart. What would you love here? What do you feel? What's happening for you in this experience? And to ask more questions that way. And yeah, there's a lot to be said for the two individuals. Like for you and I, we have our own, places that we do our own work and our own learning and our own growth individually.
Right.
And then we have where we come together. And it's really something that if one person is growing and evolving, the other person also growing and evolving is where you have this really sweet spot of then you come together and you have all this new energy and new life all the time happening too. And you have all this like getting to know each other in new ways and new things being discovered in your individual life and your individual personhood. And then you come together and you have new sparks and chemistry happening too, where you're both really alive.
Yeah. The two things are popping as you were talking for the man, only two, that there's a humbleness, like getting real humble, right? As a man. Cause I know, again, I'll just speak from my own experience. I'll be like, I'm not defensive, right? And it's like men will get very defensive, like, that we take it on as like we're doing something wrong, and we'll get defensive and want to prove that we're not wrong. And I often say to men, do you want to be right or do you want to be in love? And of course we want to be in love. So I think there's a certain amount of humility and humbleness that comes into even just like approaching and saying, look, like I want to reset here. I want to go into that. Kind of hits on the second point I was going to make where, and I'm part of like the whole movement of your work and Ignite the King. It's like normalizing, like we do the work, normalizing that, yes, you do need a place to go to process, to talk, to do your work, to then come to the relationship from a new energy state, right? Often couples will be in this loop of fighting and resentment. And I'll often ask men that share with me on like discovery calls, things like that, where it's like, they tell me they are arguing or fighting with their wife. And I'll ask them like, how often that's going on. And sometimes it's like, yeah, a few times a month, and it's seemingly like not a big deal. And I'm like, a few times a month. Like I remember when we were in chiropractic practice, be like, how often do you get headaches? Like, yeah, just like a few times a month, kind of like that's normal. And we're just like red flag, like that's not normal. That's your body saying something's really wrong here. And it's trying to tell you, and we're just, masking it obviously with drugs and different things, but in the relationship too, we'll mask it with drugs like alcohol, whatever, and just think it's kind of par for the course when it's really not. So really starting to normalize that you do the work, like you find a group, find a reach out. And for men, that's new. Like that is part of this new culture. Why we're doing this podcast, why we're telling men, like, let's normalize showing up in this way. So humbleness and the reality of there is work to do. You don't have it all figured out. Otherwise you would be in the most extraordinary relationship ever. And maybe it was at one point, right? And, the high of that initial relationship and the honeymoon era, and then life gets serious, life gets real, children come into the mix. There's that's what I know, something we're really passionate about, our mission, where once there's children involved and family involved, it's not so casual anymore. Like there you have a duty and a responsibility in a relationship to work it out. And obviously not everyone's meant to be together, and there's of course those things, but that pendulum has definitely swung in the wrong direction.
Yeah, I would say what I'm hearing in this is like getting clear on why you're there. Why are you there in the first place? Because it sounds to me like men are sounding like it's a drag, and like, why do I have to do this? And it just sounds like victim and drag. And why do I have to? And it's like, well, yeah, why do you have, like, why are you there? And make sure that you're there in sovereign choice. And if you're not really there, like you say, when did you really leave the relationship? Someone who's saying, I don't want to invest here. Why are you there? What are you doing there? And I think that there can be bringing to the relationship that there's a sense of like obligation, or, what I'm hearing is like, oh, I do all these things, and the aspects of the relationship that involve the heart or the emotions are not seen as valuable. And those are the feminine qualities. So I would, in order to come into wholeness as a man, it's valuing those things in yourself. It's like if they're a drag or thing that you have to like get through or do it because she wants to do it, then, how are you being with your own feelings? How are you being with your own heart? And are you? And I think that that's where the woman oftentimes initiates a man into the domains of his being that he wouldn't otherwise value.
Mm-hmm. Checked out. A lot of men are just checked out.
And it's ironically the place where once they get there, and, a lot of it's just getting over the threshold and the resistance, realizing resistance is like a threshold oftentimes. So it's the self-mastery also of recognizing, hey, I'm at a threshold, I'm at a crossroads, I'm at a choice point. What does it take me to get over this? And there's like, the saying of like pain pushes until vision pulls. And like the pain will just, it's going to get more. It's going to build up more. And so the self-mastery is recognizing like, hey, I'm going to respond to this while while it's still, like you say, a brick or a feather. I'm going to respond to this now because that's who I am. I think for a lot of the decisions, it's an identity-based decisions, because who the fuck are you? That's why, not because she wants you to, or because this or that. Who the fuck are you? And then that's the reason, is because that's the kind of man I am. That's the kind of woman I am. And that's what I've decided I'm here for. That's why I'm here. Otherwise, don't be there, And I think it's a sense for a woman, like what I hear from women is that, yeah, he's not present, or he doesn't value it, or he doesn't want to. And that there's like a non-awareness of what he's actually saying and choosing. And he's actually at that point not choosing her and not choosing the relationship. And he oftentimes doesn't know that. He thinks that she's going to stay no matter what because she loves him. And I think
we're married, we have kids. There's no way she's going to leave. And
and
kind of entitled.
That's the thing, is that it's the wake up call now that like she may love you or he may love you, whoever it is, but love doesn't always mean staying. Like a person will get to a choice point where they have eroded themselves and their own standards too low for too long. And the reclamation is about reclaiming their own life, And I hear from women, like they don't want to, blow up their life or get out of the marriage or whatever it is because they have children. But then the story starts to change to, well, I want to show my children a demonstration of what real love is. So now I've made the reason to leave something that actually benefits my children. And when I start hearing that story, I'm going, oh, okay, now you've changed the meaning to it. And that happens, because the woman is more committed to what's being modeled for the child, knowing that's influencing them than, actually keeping the family together. And that's a crossroads of a huge decision. And I'm sure men make it too, but that's a crossroads of a value system question where it's like, okay, I value my children, therefore I might stay because I value them having a stable home. But then the value becomes, I want them to have a demonstration in their life of true love, of expansive living, of, growth oriented leadership. And so I don't want to sit here and show them a withering woman as what to be. And a man who checks out and a woman who stands for that. And so when that story flips, it's like, whoop, okay, and so for a man, the reason I feel passionate about saying it today is because it's like, don't underestimate, what sitting on the fence will do. It's an erosion. The entire time that you're saying no to her and the relationship. You're kind of building out that trajectory. And there is a sense of maturity, that comes on the other side, when you experience the loss of the relationship or the marriage or the family or whatever it is. And you go, oh, wow, okay, let me reflect and see. I actually wasn't showing up and she was giving me signs and signals the whole time.
Yep.
And what I'm saying is really get the signs and signals now,
Right. Well, absolutely. Believe it or not, we're actually toward the end of the episode here already. And I feel like we're just scratching the surface. But what I want to hit on before we finish up here, and something we talk about a lot in Igknight, is your work is my work. And, this whole idea, I don't want to get too much into the energetics, but, bound versus unbound energy, where it's like, I don't have to have the pain of this experience to get the message or the gift of hearing about it. And that's why we have this podcast where it's like, men, pay attention. Don't wait until you're the one facing the divorce or her walking out or whatever is going on to then, like Nanilea is saying, wake up and be like, oh, I saw it the whole time. It's like, get the whisper from us now. We've seen it so many times in our group, so many times and thankfully I'll pat us on the back, saved a lot of relationships where people did engage and say, okay, I'm willing to show up and I'm willing to do the work. Men that come to the Igknight immersions, a lot of men have come from the partnerships from the women in your group and your work, where, the men have finally said, okay, I'll trust and I'll take that leap. I'll jump in the deep end. And then afterwards, why the fuck did I didn't do that sooner? Now I'm in this amazing, passionate, love-filled, ecstatic relationship, and realizing also it's not just a one and done. There is work to do. So I don't want to say oh, I'll just get the lesson from someone else. No, you actually have to show up and do the work, but heed the call right now, hear that whisper that we're giving out there that is a little bit more than a whisper, right? Where it's get that. Really get that. You, again, like we said earlier in the call, divorce takes a lot more time and costs a lot more money than going away for a weekend immersion or retreat and spending the a few $1,000s that costs. That's a small price to pay for having the life you really, really desire.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, the thing I'll say too is, sometimes I hear from men that it's, the question of oh, she wants me to do this, or, he doesn't really see yet why, or that it's important, or he doesn't value it yet. He doesn't get it. But yet she's gone to all the things. She's read all the books. She's done all this. She's she gets it. And so it becomes a time too of just being willing to trust and jump in. And in those moments, what I'll say is that you can think of yourself, and this is a one-liner to remember, be her hero, not her zero,
if I could drop this mic, I would.
Go to it because you're there to be her hero, put yourself in that. It's not a disempowering act. It's a powerful act. You're going to be her hero. Like show up there, show up to that relationship as her hero. Show, if not, know that you may end up her zero because you didn't show up, you didn't show up. And at the end of the day, that's going to be the story that you tell your children. And who do you want to be in that story? So it comes back to you. Like, what story are you writing for yourself? What's your masterpiece? Are you the hero or the zero? And you get to choose. And if you want to be the hero in your work, and that's great, but be the hero at home, be the hero in her heart. Be the one that has shown up for her in ways that she never knew possible and have shown her the love. And like make that something that you value, make that an identity that you want to live out. And that's just I see men lit up by that, by anything, more than anything. It's like, it just trumps any sort of achievement in the work world or anything, is to have their woman's heart and have them just like wildly in love with them and like just adoring them. Like that kind of energy is everything. So I would say just like get over yourself and get into the possibility that, there's something there for you, and get a guide and thank God there's Igknight the King and there's immersions where you don't have to come up with the how. You don't have to come up with it. Get somebody that can lead you through, and don't try to do it all yourself. Don't be a lone wolf that thinks he needs to do it all himself. Like that's another self-sabotage technique, and it's a lot of it underneath it is like, just trauma responses and trying to, self-preserve. And so there's a moment where you just kind of jump in and you just get on the other side of fuck it. And you say, I'm going to be the hero, not the zero. And we're going to see where this adventure takes me.
Yeah. And I'll just, that was beautiful. And man, you just don't know how many chances you're actually going to get, right, till it's over. So heed this call, and I'll just make a plug for our immersion. We have our next Igknight the King immersion coming up in the middle of May. You have the Igknight the Queen immersion coming up in the beginning of May here in Austin, both going to be in Austin. So, whether you're the man listening to this that knows you've been getting that signal and getting that, like, you need to show up, there'll be a link in the comments here to apply for that. There'll be a link for Nanilea's Queen Retreat. Maybe you're the man trying to get your woman. I also see that with the men in my group that are showing up and doing the work. And they're like, okay, how do I get my woman, my wife, to come and do this work as well? So again, like we said at the beginning, it does go both ways. So if you're hearing this and you're at that precipice and you need to step over that initiatory gateway, that threshold guardian of your own mind, take the action. Woo! If you've been listening this far and you're one of those men, it is time, and the time is now. So a lot more to share on this. We're gonna wrap it here. And thank you so much for sharing your beauty, your grace, your insights. I'm a product of showing up and doing the work. So that's the little show. See that little shoulder shrug, man? That's what you want. That's the response. That's how you know it's working. And men out there, like, share, subscribe this. Maybe it's not you. Maybe you're in a good place and you know someone that needs this work. Share this with them. And as always, make it a great day. And we will see you on the next episode. Aho.